Well, this week, Pascal, we are going to talk about a film from 1990. It's your choice. It's your choice. It's called Tremors. Let's watch the trailer.
Welcome to Perfection, Nevada, land of opportunity.
You know how close I am to leaving this place right now? How close?
Where a man can make a clean living.
See, we plan ahead. That way we don't do anything right now. Earl explained it to me.
Hey, Mindy, what's the count?
640.
In Perfection, they say there's nothing new under the sun, but under the ground.
These creatures are absolutely unprecedented.
Yes, I say, come on over, baby. Baby, can't go wrong.
But where do they come from?
I vote for outer space. No way these are local boys.
How could they bury a whole station wagon?
Now, this valley is just one long smorgasbord.
We can make it! Come on over.
That's how they get you. They're under the ground.
Them prairie dog burrow.
We arm ourselves. We set perimeters. We stand guard.
Kevin Bacon.
We could get in People magazine.
Fred Ward.
People. Hell. National Geographic.
Tremors.
We decided to leave this place just one damn day too late.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Now, as I said earlier, Pascal, I only watched this film for the first time 2 nights ago, but I know that you're a massive fan of this film, and actually you watch it every year, don't you?
Oh, completely. I mean, so I first saw it in 1990, the year of the release in France, in Bordeaux. There was or still is, a cinema, which was an old theatre converted into cinema. So the outside of the building, it's this grand kind of stone building. And for our viewers and listeners who are from a younger age, in the 1990s or the 80s, we used to turn up at the cinema and just see what was there. Do you remember those days where we didn't know because there was no kind of IMDb or Yahoo movies and so on. So you would literally turn up and the movies, look up at the posters above the entrance. And with my then girlfriend, we saw this poster for Tremors and went, "Oh, I want to see that." So we paid the tickets, and then my heart had to sink because we'd taken down the corridor and we were taken to the last screening room at the bottom of this long corridor, which was always a sign of a movie that wasn't really that good. Oh. So it was like at the back of the proper screening rooms, small room. There was maybe 20, 30 people in that room. And it was the most joyous moment, or one of the most joyous moments in my kind of moving-going life. We laughed, we cheered, we got scared, we love everything. And this experience, basically, I want to go through it again once a year, so from VHS cassette to then DVDs to Blu-rays and so on. And it wasn't until I did the research for the marketing campaign that I realized that, I wasn't the only one. I knew I wasn't the only one, but that there was such a movement around the film to the point where when I was doing the research, I think I put a tweet saying, "Oh, I'm doing some research on Tremors," and I came across this video of a speech by Gail Ann Hurd, who was the exec producer on Tremors. And within milliseconds, back to your point about Twitter, the collective under the Twitter account, the Tremors Saga, responded, give me links and informations and tell me to go there and give me names and so on. And the Tremors Saga is a collective of the original filmmakers and cast, as well as a fan base. And it so happens that today, as we are recording this film marketing review of Tremors, is also day one of the 3-day Tremors Fest in Santa Fe in New Mexico.
Wow. Well, as I said, Pascal, this film has escaped me. I haven't watched it. I've never seen it until 2 days ago. Now, funnily enough, I was saying to Tricia, we need to watch Tremors, and there was almost a look for a moment of despair in her face. She says, "Oh, that's something to do with Kevin Bacon and worms, isn't it?" And I sort of immediately thought, oh no, this is going to be a really tacky B movie. So I actually didn't have very high expectations. I just thought it was one of these films that has somehow become, a cult classic for no reason. I have to say, I'll preface this by saying the copy that we actually ended up watching was quite a ropey DVD, and it wasn't the clearest of pictures, which is an absolute shame, because what I thought initially was that the scenery of this film was absolutely spectacular. The location was utterly stunning, and I would love to see a 4K Blu-ray version of this just for that fact. But the fact is, we loved the film, and it's nice and short, 90 minutes. You can always guarantee that a film is worth watching if Tricia doesn't go to sleep during it, and she was awake all the way through it and loved it. And yeah, it was. I thought it was the cast were excellent. I thought the storytelling was good, the visuals. Even though it was mechanical effects, they got away with most of it. There was no ropey green screen as far as I could see, and the mechanical effects worked well. There was a lot of tension. The cast as well absolutely nailed it, and I thought Kevin Bacon and his relationship. They kept doing.
That's been my youth doing the
scissors cut paper and all that. That was quite funny. In fact, I thought I'd spotted a trend in that the other guy, I can't remember his name,
Fred
Ward.
Fred Ward,
he always did scissors, and I thought, are they going to build up to something that Kevin Bacon always loses because the other guy always does scissors? But the final time they did it, it was the opposite way around, and Kevin Bacon did scissors. So anyway, I was wrong about that, but it was quite funny. But it just what I thought here, it reminded me a little bit of 1970s Doctor Who, and funnily enough, we are actually watching a few of the old John Pertwee series now. And one of the reasons why Doctor Who worked back in the 70s was, even though the sets were obviously made out of cardboard and polystyrene, even though the monsters were obviously made out of rubber, it was the actors who utterly believed in the script, and they delivered it as if they believed absolutely, and no question about how real it was. And that made it work. And to me, that's what happened here. Yes, those mechanical effects, if you really examine them, if you did a freeze frame, you'd probably see, well, it's just a rubber worm. But I just thought the actors, the conviction was so real that they carried the entire movie and genuinely made it scary and genuinely made it exciting, because they utterly believed in what they were doing.
And it was, problem solving after problem solving, and what I think, I know this is not a filmmaking review, but you can't help but be impressed by the determination, but also the quality. You talk about the location, but let's talk about the script writing. We have the work of Stephen S. Wilson and Brent Maddock, who were inspired by actually an idea they had when they were younger. The director Ron Underwood, who committed so much, and all the producers from Gail Anherd, which I mentioned, to Ginny Nugent and Ellen Collett. And the reason why I mentioned their names, Roger, is as follows: is because here we are talking about this movie 33 years ago, and they themselves, had to go through a very painful phase where, for reasons that actually were totally unfounded, they went through a phase where they were linked to a failure. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is kind of interesting to explore in a moment. One thing that I love as well about the movie, because it's everything you mentioned, and also the music. The music captures the tonality of the movie well. So when it's scary, it's music matches. But when there's something quite light-hearted, where some of the dialogues which we saw in the trailer are just so funny, and you've got all that going on. And something they did really cleverly, which is the mark of that kind of indie spirit of filmmaking, is casting against type. So you had, for example, the character of Bert, played by Michael Gross from Family Ties, who was a kind of a gentle family movie with a very young Michael J. Fox. You had people like Victor Wong. We had a very young Ariana Richards, who plays Mindy, young girl with the pogo stick, who 3 years later will be in Jurassic Park. So you've got all that going on. And when you watch, and as I did, a bit more about the documentary, there was not one individual who was not committed to make this movie work. And I think that's why we are where we are all those years ago. And certainly, if I may address the filmmakers and the producers, I've converted 2 people to the Tremors kind of franchise. I think I've done my bit. But shall we move on very quickly then, Roger, if you don't mind, to the film marketing? So this movie was released in the US 19th of January 1990. And it begins in November 89. So that's a bit brief, but, you know, we are where we are, where a teaser trailer was released in theaters. And the one that we saw a moment ago, can I just say I loved the hiss and the crackle of a 90s kind of VHS cassette. And my view would be, and you've seen it obviously more recently, that this trailer did a very good job to capture all the elements of the story, did a big job to show the practical special effects without showing the graboids.
Yeah, absolutely right. And again, I guess, you know, I did make a sort of comparison to Jaws with this film when I was watching it with Trisha, and I did think that they were very good at actually keeping the worms mainly hidden for the majority of the movie. You don't actually see them on screen for that long. You know, the editing is so good. You get a glimpse, enough to scare you, and then they cut back to the characters. And I mean, we know that the Jaws was an incredible film in terms of tension and the way they built it up, but ultimately it was a rubber shark, and you can't really look at it very closely to see and to actually ruin the illusion. And it's the editing of the film that creates the tension by keeping it hidden. And I think they did that remarkably well here.
Yeah, and for me, what was interesting on the kind of second or third watch of the trailer was I didn't realize somehow that there was also a nice tongue-in-cheek selection of the music, the Johnny B. Good, shaking going on. So you've got all that. The trailer was supported by TV and radio spots, interestingly, 15 seconds and 30 seconds, which proves the point that you can say a hell of a lot in 15 seconds. Yeah. The two that stood out for me, there was one that was including reference to the older horror movies of the 50s and 60s. Yeah. As a reminder, everyone, of course, the filmmakers were inspired by their youth, like you and I would be, with regard to spending time watching very late at night where the parents say you should be sleeping and watching TV, black and white horror movies. And in fact, the script, of that particular TV spot says first there was Frankenstein, then Dracula, and then you had a black and white, kind of things. And the creature from the Black Lagoon that scared me senseless when I was a child. And now there is something no one has ever seen before because it's under the ground. So you've got all that going on, which I think is superb. But of course, as well as the trailers, they organize, Roger, and you can tell us a bit more about it, some visits to the set.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how much information you've managed to dig up, Pascal. see what I did there? Dig up about this film, given that it was 33 years ago. But yeah, January 1990, to promote the film's release, the studio organised a press junket in Lone Pine, California, which is where the movie was filmed. I mean, what a great I still come back to that. The scenery was stunning. I'd love to have gone there. I'd love to go there. And journalists were given a tour of the set, and they were able to interview all the cast and all the crew.
And what is interesting, this was repeated for Lord of the Rings. So one of our very first film marketing reviews were Lord of the Rings, and we reported on that. But it started much earlier. What I think is also important is to realize that Lone Pine, the set was built. There was nothing. There was just sand and rocks and this magnificent mountain range, as a backdrop, and everything was built. Because this was an indie movie and they had to be careful about money and expenditure, they sometimes went around places like Lone Pine and the other kind of small towns, and they were buying wooden sheds and wooden houses off people who were just derelict and just build them again to create the town of perfection, which is also, I think, very, very cheeky of the filmmakers. We're going to make a film about perfection. And so then he moved on to, of course, print advertising. Now, sadly, unless there is some librarian and archivist of the filmmaking business, I couldn't find any kind of examples to show you. Needless to say, though, they carried on that kind of tongue-in-cheek, humorous style where images and we don't know what they are, with the strapline, the monster movie that breaks new ground.
That's so good. And again, January 1990, Universal Pictures also launched a radio advertising campaign. And again, there was the humour in there. A lot of fake news reports about Tremors felt in in that small town in Nevada. Again, I'm going back to content spotlights and what Alton Towers are doing with the Phalanx. It's making something up and surrounding the film with other content, other theming. I just love this whole. This episode has really worked for me because we've had these interlinking themes. But again, these radio spots, great fun. But they suck people into the environment, don't they? Make you believe in what's happening, and it becomes almost real. It's just so interesting.
Yes, but to your point, sorry, Roger, this was 1990, so that's what I love about film marketing, because you go back to techniques and really strategies where it's when actually you have limitations, when you're up against it, that you come up with something quite innovative. Can I just give someone the shout out, because this radio spot, I knew its existence purely from the point of view of research, but I didn't know I would even actually find it. And we have a gentleman called Tim Salmons, who's the host of the movie and video game TV spots YouTube channel, and I was able to find it and listen to it, and it's great. It's a fake news report about strange things happening in not far from Los Angeles.
Yeah, and of course, again, all the way through January 1990, we've got the stars, Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, an interview in the Chicago Tribune with producer Gail and her discussing the film's appeal. She said it's a combination of humour and horror. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's one of the things that sets it apart from other monsters. I think they got that balance absolutely right, because it's very easy in a film like this that is trying to be funny to go too far the wrong way, and you actually become a parody of yourself, and you're actually sending yourself up. And a lot of movies make that mistake. I think this one didn't, and that's one of the reasons why it's so good. And again, another interview in the Los Angeles Times. Ron Underwood, the director, discussed the challenges of marketing the film. It's difficult to convey the tone of the movie in a trailer. It's not a horror movie. It's not a comedy. It's not a satire. It's a little bit of all of those things. But I think they managed it remarkably. So there were some challenges, though, Pascal, wasn't there, in the marketing of this film?
Yes, thank you. What you just read, excuse me, is give me a wonderful segue into what we now know, because it's been documented. They've actually shared the Los Angeles in documentaries about what they had created, which was a tribute to 1950s monster movies, who used to take themselves very seriously and would be scary, but bring the humor of the 1990s. Because in fact, that paved the way into more movies who then used to have the one-liners and so on. And it's almost like the history of, if I may use an analogy, of the Nightmare on Elm Street. The first two were very, very dark and scary, but the third one, Dream Warriors, went actually very humorous. So there was back and forth. There was disagreement, to put it mildly, between the filmmakers and the studios, who wanted to have a simple message. They wanted essentially to go for a straightforward horror movie and to emphasize the scares and actually tone down the humor, because the studios thought the humor would actually put people off and turn audiences away. But they kept going. But the major point of contention was the poster. So the filmmakers wanted a poster that was an enigmatic, I would say, in term, and the two were fighting and fighting. They actually wanted the graboids to be on the poster. And I think the compromise was, for people who've seen the film, to just show one of the tentacles, with the teeth, the tendrils with the teeth, so that the full monster wasn't revealed. But for the filmmakers, they felt that it was too close to Jaws, oddly produced and distributed by Universal Pictures as well as Tremors, and there was definitely tension there.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the poster now, and yet you've got the characters stood above ground, and for that you could almost see the surface of the water in the Jaws poster, and then below the surface you've got this great big set of teeth, which is so close to the Jaws poster. I was very struck by that, but I still think it's quite effective.
And I've loved it. I mean, I've said at it since the 90s and from VHS cassettes and so on. And listen, in terms of the studio, they didn't really, cut corners. They used the artist Bob Peake, who went on to fans for doing posts like the Star Wars original trilogy, Apocalypse Now, Superman, and so on. So there was a real artist behind it. They did look at other options where the graboids were not present. What I will say is that not as effective. So I get it. It's not nice sometimes to, I suppose, you worry that someone's going to say, oh, all you've done is rip off Jaws. Although I would argue there are far worse movies to be compared with than Jaws, of course. So all this leads to the premiere in January. Listen, number 5 behind Born on the 4th of July, Tango and Cash, The War of the Roses, and Internal Affairs. That's not bad for an indie movie with a small budget of $10 million. I know $10 million is a lot of money, but compared to the other 4. But unfortunately, and marketing plays a role in that, maybe it was too short, maybe there wasn't enough going on. The sales, on the opening weeks were disappointed, and somehow the conclusion was this is a failure. But there goes, the story carries on, because weeks later, a month later, then we move into a home video rental. We move into television screening on channels and so on. And suddenly Tremors just becomes this incredible success. And I can confirm that was the case because I was working in video store in the 90s. It was still the most rented films in 90, 91, 92.
That's incredible, isn't it? And then all the way through the last 30 years, it's become this cult film. And now, of course, it's available on Blu-ray. There's definitely a 4K version. I checked. And as I say, I'd love to see it, even just for that scenery, just for the scenery before we even get into the plot and everything. That has to be seen in higher quality. But it's remarkable, isn't it, how the momentum has been kept up for this film all the way through. Even something I just noticed there is that the website is still in existence. 30 years on. Now, this is remarkable because we've done reviews of films where the website's disappeared within months, whereas this one, they've kept up the momentum over the time, obviously to promote the videos and the Blu-rays and the 4K UHD. But it's remarkable the momentum that they've kept going with this.
And back to the team behind the Tremors saga, who helped me and point me in the right directions. You can find the YouTube channel of the producers directors where they have their own home movies. So we're talking about people walking around with cameras filming in 16 millimeters and having to convert into digital. So you have one with one of the producers called The Lost Files, where you can see the actors and the crew laughing and trying to get the practical effects working and so on. It's just absolutely glorious. And within that, I discovered something that I think is going to be great for you to know. So, of course, there are documentaries. Of course, there's been things, but there's also a book called Seeking Perfection, the unofficial guide to Tremors, written by John Melville. He was interviewed as part of the documentary, and I said, this is an accent that I recognize. And when I find out that John Melville, the author of the book Seeking Perfection, lives in Edinburgh, I thought I must tell Roger. And perhaps, if I may be so bold, we could have John on the show one of those days to tell us more about Tremors.
That would be really interesting. I didn't know that. So fantastic link there. And again, there's. I think what really just gets me about this is the momentum that has carried on throughout all of this time. And I am so glad, Pascal, that you chose this film, because I would probably not have watched it, because I just had it in my head that it was a very cheap flick from the 90s that wasn't very successful and was badly made and had rubbish effects and rubbish sort of B-movie feel to it, when in fact it is as you say, pretty much near to perfection. I think it's not about seeking perfection; it was actually creating perfection. And always nice to see Kevin Bacon in a role in his younger years. I think he is one of my favourite actors from when I was younger. And fantastic. So Pascal, thanks for choosing this. I think we should wrap up the show now. This has been a great show. I just loved the way that we've intertwined all of the themes. We've had monsters under the ground. We've reset Twitter, and we've looked at some great tech as well. So tell us what you think about all the things that we've discussed today. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, please do get in touch. You can speak to us on Twitter. You can contact us through the YouTube channel. Leave us a comment there, or Pascal, you can leave us a message on SpeakPipe. Remind me how that happens.
Yes, thank you very much. Just go on the webpage, speakpipe.com/2 Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. You can record an audio message, which we'll play on the show for you, and we can respond and react to your comment and request.
And as always, do please let us know what you think of the content. Let us know what you'd like us to review. If you've seen any apps that are working for you in your business, tell us what they are so that we can have a go and review them as well. And tell us what films you have enjoyed recently you'd like us to dig deep into the marketing. So thank you once again for watching. Thank you for listening to Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Until the next episode, please go out there and make sure that your marketing is done right. As always, I was Roger Edwards and he was Pascal Fintoni.